I find that when you can build an environment where you've got connection and then you end up with trust and the empathy, you will get gains far beyond what you ever imagined.
Psychological safety is number one. It is where people will thrive and grow and really find their best and their potential, and they'll work even harder for you.
The greatest temptation in life is to stay where we are. We need to resist that temptation. Keep finding a way to be the best in ourselves.
This is what we are trying to achieve in all aspects of our life, is to create that environment for everyone around you.
Screw all of that. Screw perception. Screw what people think we're supposed to be, and just be the best you that you can be. Bring out the quirkiness, bring out the curiosity, bring out that love and that desire and that spark, and just shine.
Welcome back to the EOR podcast. I'm your host, Quinn Magnuson. Today's guest is someone whose story spans legacy, elite sport, and purpose beyond the podium. Georgette Reed and I share a Washington State University connection, and like many Cougars, her journey was forged through discipline, resilience, and grit. The daughter of CFL legend George Reed, Georgette built her own path, becoming an Olympian for Canada in shot put, competing on the world stage, and later transitioning into meaningful work in mental health and physical wellness. Today, she helps people navigate pressure, identity, and what it means to keep showing up when the applause fades. Georgette, welcome. Really glad you're here.
Oh, it's wonderful to be here. Thanks for having me.
So let's talk about our WSU roots. We both competed at Washington State University back in the 1900s. I believe we were there. I want to remember because I was there 89 to 92. What years were you there?
86 to 91.
Obviously, you and I both have a Cougar legacy there. Well, you have much more of a legacy than I do. Mine was very short-lived. But when you think back now, did that environment at Washington State or the American University collegiate, D1 student athlete culture and environment, did that really shape you, not just in athletics, but beyond that?
Certainly, it helped me grow. When I left Canada to go to WSU, I didn't know anything about NC2A sport or anything like that. I wasn't going down there because I wanted to have better competitions or any of that type of stuff. I went to WSU because my dad went to WSU. That's the only reason why I ended up there. I wanted to go to UCLA and play water polo and do other things and swim, but dad wanted me to go to WSU. And so I went there on a swimming scholarship. And I thought, okay, this is going to be great. I'll keep swimming. Maybe I'll be able to do well enough to make the Olympic trials in '88 and go from there. And WSU didn't really teach me so much about, how to be resilient on the field or in the pool. It was more about doing the stuff off of the sporting performance arena. I learned a lot about racism, learned a lot about, people's perceptions about who you are before they've even really met you. They just look at you and decide what you can and can't do. I got told when I went down there for my swimming scholarship that I couldn't be a swimmer because I was black and black people didn't swim. And I was recruited, based on my resume of swimming times and stuff like that. And I ended up being one of the best swimmers in the pool through going through the trials and tribulations of having people tell me what I couldn't do. I realized that, no, I'm going to show people what I can do. And sometimes that's a slippery slope to get yourself into because you end up pushing yourself to do things that maybe you shouldn't. And I ended up with a shoulder injury and I ended up with all kinds of other mental health issues and things like that because of always trying to prove myself to other people. I had a really great, counselor at WSU who said, try something new. And I somehow walked onto the track team. And it was one of those things where I learned a lot about just believing in myself and just giving it a try when nobody else believed. And it was hard because there was a lot of doubt. There's a lot of times when I said, what am I doing here? There's a lot of times when I thought about just quitting and leaving, but then I realized that I had an opportunity to get a degree. I had an opportunity to go to university. And so I thought, well, I'm just going to bet on myself and give myself a chance. And kind of went from there. Nobody expected me to do anything in track. Nobody expected me to end up being the school record holder for 30 plus years or 32 years in the shot put or, and to do really well in the discus and to go to nationals several times and represent WSU. And I know nobody expected me in 4 years to qualify for the Canadian Olympic team and go and represent Canada on the international stage. So, it's one of those things where you never know what's going to happen, but you just keep moving forward. And I think that's been kind of the theme of my life for everything that I've experienced.
I think you just summed up what effort over results really means. And for us here, it is, like you said, just moving forward, putting the efforts into the things that excite you, that make you happy, that you feel like you could be good at, but not really knowing what's going to happen on the other end, not expecting results. I know that you're a very driven competitor. And like I said, you and I have competed for Canada, and that competitive spirit is there, but at the same time, you and I both recognize that it's the hard work and effort that really is what guides you. It's not necessarily a result, because the results we can't control, right? I want to touch upon on the racism thing, because it's it's intriguing, and now I'm going to go off script because I think people need to hear this. So growing up in Saskatchewan in the late 70s, 80s, right? Did you experience racial tension, racism in Saskatchewan growing up? Because we both are from Saskatchewan. I grew up there in the 70s and 80s, but for me, the racism that was in the province of Saskatchewan, and for those of you from my audience who are from the United States or the UK or whatever, it's a province of about 1 million people now, but a very gigantic geography. The racism that I felt happened in the 70s and 80s and 90s when I was growing up was more towards the Indigenous First Nations people. But I want to hear it from the perspective of African Canadians now growing up in that province, because there weren't a lot of African Canadians growing up in Saskatchewan. I knew a handful, not even a handful growing up. And so what was that like, Georgette? Tell me about that.
It was different because I think that I was able to experience it from a bit of a privileged position, and I say that because my dad was George Reed. He
Right.
was the be all end all of football
Legend.
players, in that era and in that time. Living in Regina at that time, there were only 2 black families, really, us and the McQuarters, and the McQuarters had 2 boys in it, and my dad had myself and then my older brother and older sister. So most people knew that if it was a little black girl, it's probably a Reed. And so, if the games were going well, then, you got treated pretty well. If the games aren't going pretty well, you get the sneers and the whatevers. But I think that I did hear, you hear the slang and the terms and all that kind of stuff, and sometimes people feel like they're really brave when they yell something at you as they're passing by in a car. But I didn't feel that as much growing up in Regina as, say, when I would go to visit my cousins in the summertime in Seattle. Then I understood what racism really was. In Regina, growing up in Regina, I felt a little bit more shielded and protected because we were a bigger fish in a smaller pond. When I got to Washington State, I was just another black girl. And I got there and all of a sudden you could feel different things. And even some of the other black students were like, "You're not like us. You're a little bit different. You don't talk like that us." And I'm like, "What? You mean I speak complete sentences? I speak complete, I don't use slang." And they're just like, "You're just different." And I said, "Well, I'm from Canada." And some of them had no idea where that even was. And I was just like, "Okay, you know what? You think that you can assimilate into a culture because you look very much the same, but then you realize that no matter what you do, you're always going to be a unique individual. So you always have to make sure that you are fortified in who you are to be able to stand up and do that. And when you're younger, it's hard. But as I grew older and as I learned and as I got to like Washington State and things like that, I was like, okay, I'm just going to be me, and I've just got to do this to the best of my ability. And so when the swimming thing came up and I had the coach tell me that I didn't swim because I was black and that she didn't believe in me and didn't give me my scholarship. She actually took my scholarship away or held it until I could prove to her that I could swim.
Until you weren't black. Like,
Yeah,
what's
exactly.
going on?
Exactly. And then when I could prove to her that I could swim, by that time she'd already given the scholarship away. So then, it's getting 3 jobs and, working in an office environment, being a lifeguard, working in the gym, to be able to help pay for school because I didn't have those scholarships right away. And all of those things could make people hard, but for me, it made me curious, and it made me just like, "Okay, what next?" Like, I need to just push forward, and I think that's what also kinda drove me to just do the best that I could be. It doesn't matter how black I am, I'm still not gonna be like another black person. And and there are good black people and people that aren't so great, and the way they are in every culture and whatever, it's about the individual. And I didn't wanna be lumped into perception, and so I wanted to just share my individuality, and whether if that was I had a thing about smiling at everybody, that I saw, no matter what was going on, I was always smiling. Even when I was angry, I was smiling, and it's just one of those things. And I still do it to this day when I go for walks and I smile and people are like, "Thank you," and whatever. And I'm like, we're afraid to connect with people, and unfortunately, and after COVID and everything, people are so withdrawn and they're afraid to actually do connection. And that's always been something that I've been big on, is connecting with people, and I think that's also what's driven me and kind of let me not let the racism stuff take over and create a barrier or a wall. Instead, I just kinda let that be a door to being able for people to get to know who I am.
I definitely we're gonna talk about social connection and mental health in a few minutes here, but the thing that blows my mind is the swimming thing. I love that you found your passion in track and field. It obviously went on to, incredible success. Something else I need to explain to our listeners from the United States. Georgette's dad, George, who was a running back at Washington State University and went on to basically become the GOAT of the Canadian Football League for running backs. He would be the equivalent to like a Walter Payton in the NFL. So for those of you who don't know, Google him, George Reed, CFL, Saskatchewan Roughriders. Absolute legend of a man. I met your dad so many times during my time with the alumni. Recently passed away, but just I love your family and you all light up a room when you come into events, and like you said, that smile that's on your face. The other thing I want to ask you about, Georgette, is just growing up in general. I want to talk about your influences because at Effort Over Results, what I try to explain to people is that I'm not ignoring the fact that results don't matter. Like we need to acknowledge that we like winning, we
Mhm.
like achieving and getting the results that we strive that we're working towards, but that in growing young people, especially young student athletes or just your own children or the kids in a classroom, athletes on a field, employees in an employment situation, they want a psychologically safe space where they feel they can be themselves and that they're being recognized for the effort that they put in. Because it's once again, as I said before, it's the only thing they can control. And my greatest influences, the teachers that I loved, the aunts and uncles that really influenced me, the coaches that I had growing up in football and track and other sports, were the ones that made me feel safe when I was around them and their teams and their areas. But they also didn't preach constant results messaging. It really was just more about work hard, like put in the time, put in the work, you've got it in you. You just gotta, you kind of gotta keep going at it. And so we talk about those coaches we would run through a brick wall for, those teachers that we absolutely love being in their classroom. And a lot of the time, it wasn't about what we were learning in the classroom, it was the environment they created. It wasn't about winning, it was about the environment a coach created. And same thing goes for employment. And we're going to talk about the work you do in mental health in a few minutes. Who were your influences growing up? Those people, those adults in your life growing up that really just created that psychologically safe environment that allowed you to really grow and bloom and just be yourself.
Oh, wow. I've had a few, as far as, like, educators and then as coaches. I remember I had a coach named Hartley Kerr who was just really kind and just really cared about the person, and that was something that really spoke volumes to me. And then a coach that I still keep in touch with, Barry Healy, when I was swimming in Regina, he was an English guy, and he was kinda tough and rough around the edges, but he had this passion and this gentleness, and it was about, you know, showing up. And with him and then another coach that I had, Reiner Golche, who was also, Regina and swimming, is about doing the work. And it was about the little things. Like with Reiner, it was making sure that you recorded what you were doing and your thoughts and everything in your logbook, because logbooks were really important. And every week he wanted you to, complete your logbook and hand it in. And if you didn't hand your logbook in on Saturday, you had to show up Sunday and do 1,500-meter fly. That was how you started your workout. And I love the challenge. So I would hand my logbook in on Saturday's workout, and I'd still show up Sunday and do 1,500-meter fly.
Wow.
Well, from just doing that and having that challenge, I dropped my 200 fly time by like 12 seconds in a meet one time. Like it was just ridiculous. And it was just that challenge and that extra little bit of inspiration about doing something and about going the extra mile with the effort. It wasn't about the result. It wasn't about do this so you can get this time. It was just like, you need to show up. And that's something that I live by now. If I show up, the rewards will come. But I have to show up every day. And you don't have to be perfect when you show up. You don't have to look glamorous. You just have to be there and you have to participate. And I think that's the hugest part right now with many people is just getting them to show up and giving whatever it is they have for that day. There's no such thing as being perfect, and I wouldn't want to be perfect. I've always said that I just want to be me and give the best that I can every day of whatever I have that day. If I only have 40% and I give 100% of that 40%, then I've given 100% for that day, and some days you'll have even more. And so those coaches taught me about showing up and giving that effort. And then when I got into track and field, I had a coach, Marcia Mecklenburg, she tried really hard. She didn't know all of the technical things with track, but she welcomed me and at least let me try and gave me some structure and some parameters. But then there was a coach named Rick Sloan who took
Coach
me in.
Sloan. Yeah,
Like,
me too. I love him.
yeah, I loved him because he was like, okay, even though the men's and the women's teams had to practice separately, he'd meet me at a separate time, and me and him and Dan O'Brien would go and
Yeah.
do discus training or shot put, and he's the one that helped me learn about rotational shot because Marcia didn't know much about it, and I wanted to do it, and she helped me the best she could, but Coach Sloan really got me into that. And it was funny because Coach Chaplin, who was the head coach of the program at the time, and he was kind of an ornery old cuss. He knew my dad, and so usually he didn't care much for women's sport, but he kind of turned a blind eye to me being able to do stuff with the men's team, and I learned a lot from doing that, and then hanging out with Tor Gustafsson and uh, Johansson and all these guys that would teach me things in the weight room, and so I got a chance to learn organically, like almost like having a real um like internship, and learning, as a layman about how to do so many things. And that helped pique my interest. So I learned things not only that helped me athletically, but then it piqued my interest for the things that I wanted to do away from the track and away from sport.
What a great story. And I recognize all those names that you mentioned because they were there when I was at Washington State. And my I'm interested in understanding once again the transition from, you told the story about swimming and how the coach pulled your scholarship because you were black, and even though you had the times and you were proving yourself, it just didn't seem to work out. And I always look back on events like that in my life and I go, huh, that's probably one of the best things that ever could happen to me, right? Even though in the moment it's not positive. But talk about that transition quickly. Like, how did you end up? Did you go straight into the throws events, or did you try different events on the track and realized, I have the strength and size to be a thrower? How did that happen?
Well, had been swimming a ton. One, trying to again prove myself, even when I lost my scholarship. Um, the coach was like, you have to be at 8 practices a week. And I'd be like, Forget that. I'd go to 13, when I was swimming in Regina.
Mhm.
So then I would swim on my lunch hour. I would swim after I finished lifeguarding. Whenever I had extra, I put in the extra time, the extra miles, because I wanted to prove myself. Well, back then, that whole adage of no pain, no gain really, was really something that kind of drove me. So my shoulder was killing me. But, I would sit there and swim and swim and swim, and I stretched a little, and you work out. But as swimmers, we didn't get in the gym a whole lot. So there wasn't that huge correlation, at least with this coach. And so I swam a ton, and I remember taking 8 Motrin, after every practice, and having a bag of ice on my shoulder, and just saying, it's okay, it's gonna work. I can do this. Until finally it didn't. So one day I'm swimming along and put my arm in the water and didn't feel a thing. And I was just like, okay. And the doctor was like, well, we can do surgery and you can end up having a scar, on your shoulder for ever and ever. We're going to have to cut from halfway on the front side to halfway through the back side. And I'm just like, you know what? No. Or he says, you can try something new, move to doing something else. And then that's when the counselor at the university said, well, why don't you try track and field? And I walked into the coach's office and I was like, Coach, I want to try track. And he goes, you haven't really done it. He says, well, we were interested in you because you were a provincial champion and whatever, but you haven't really done much and we haven't seen anything. And I said, well, let me try. And he's like, okay, well, how about high jump or, sprints? And I'm like, no, don't do any of that. And he's like, well, let's check out with the throws. And at first, the discus, and it was okay, but they had Laura Levine, who was like, a champion and just incredible athlete. And then the shot put was something where I had no idea how I was going to throw that thing. And at first they tried getting me to glide and do it the old way that it was taught. And I, being the curious person that I was, looked at other things and watched some of the guys. Randy Barnes was big back then, and it's like rotation. I want to be able to do
This is
rotation.
when rotation really wasn't a thing. Like I
It
think
wasn't
Barnes was the like Brian Oldfield in the 70s, but Barnes was the first one to really take it to the next level.
exactly make it mainstream, and there were no women rotating at that time, or
Right.
very few. So it was a new thing to kind of bring in. And I remember when I came back to Canada and was, competing to try to make national teams and stuff like that. And everybody else is gliding and I'm doing rotation and people are like, why are you doing this? And I'm like, because this is how I throw. But then I was getting results. And then all of a sudden you could start seeing more people rotating. And now you don't see hardly anybody
Right.
gliding anymore because rotation is the way to go. But it was one of those things where, again, trial and error, just doing different things. Again, people looking at me and going, well, you're a pretty big girl. Maybe you should do this. And I'm like, well, let me try this instead. Kind of like, don't judge a book by its cover type of thing. Just let me figure my way out. And so that's where Marcia was really good that way, where she just kind of said, okay, well, go ahead and try, and then she realized when I was training with Coach Sloan and, she'd watch a little bit, but, didn't want to ruffle feathers. So just kind of let me do things. And then I would say to her, okay, this is what we're working on. And then she would learn. And yeah, it was an interesting growth kind of period. It wasn't like I was a track and field prodigy from a young age and then, came up and spent 20 years and then made the Olympics. It was something that happened really, really quickly. And after my Olympic experience, after my Washington State experience and my Olympic experience, I spent another, 15 years trying to figure out how to really, match all the things that I had learned in the first 4 years.
So when you left swimming to go to track and field, were you your stature, were you like swimmer sized, meaning, and how do I explain that to people? But I wouldn't naturally think that a swimmer, even though they obviously have some strength, are not built for shot put.
No.
A shot put is it's bulk, it's heavy, it's 400-pound benches, discus kind of similar, longer limbs, but maybe that's where the swimming thing came in. But yeah, like when you first stepped into the circle for a shot put and or discus, like were you thrower size? It doesn't seem to me like you would have been.
No, I wasn't thrower size at all. The first I think the first summer they were trying to make me thrower size, and I think I gained, like, more than the freshman 30. I think I gained about 50 or 60 pounds because I think as a swimmer, at the height of my swimming, I think I was 132 pounds, maybe between 132, 154. And then when I got into throwing, 225 was kind of an average. And then when I was at the Olympics, I think I was around 200. So, I was considered small. I was still considered very small for a thrower. And my body went through all kinds of different transitions. It's funny, my shoulder stopped hurting because I wasn't doing the overarm motion that kept bothering my rotator cuff. So all of a sudden the shoulder started to get better and the legs started getting stronger and knees and again hanging out with Tor and Johan And being in the weight room, I learned about Olympic lifting and everything. And I remember when I first started squatting, I could maybe squat like, the bar and 40 pounds. And, and Tor and Jan were like, no, this isn't going to work. And so they worked with me a lot. And by the time I think I finished my third year, I was squatting like 360 pounds for sets of 5. And so the football team would walk out because I'd go in and start getting ready to. So Kevin Graffis was there, and
Right, Kevin
yeah, Kevin Graffis and Mark oh,
Verstegen.
Verstegen, yes.
Yeah.
He was the assistant. So then they would help me and whatever, and I'd be doing all my squats and whatnot. And then I think my fourth year I was squatting 460 pounds for sets of 4, and huge legs and ripping it out. And then the shot just started flying, and I was
Yeah.
throwing 17 meters and whatever else. And again, just learned a lot about strength and conditioning and stuff, working with those guys. Like, I mean, Mark Verstegen now is like super famous
Hollywood
for,
works with
yeah, for
Hollywood stars. Yeah.
everything he did. So my claim to fame is I worked with him, when he was still just a graduate, assistant and whatever at Washington State. Um, but just learned a passion for movement and whatnot. And then also about accepting body size, because that was something
Yeah.
back then, even if you had to be a certain size to be a thrower, or a certain size to be a jumper or whatever. And I was like, well, I can't be that size, or I don't want to be that size, because that's not going to work for my body. And so it was finding something that fit. And, you know, that might have been the very beginnings for me for body positivity. But, I've always been a big girl, and I always knew I was going to be a big girl. So, I'm never going to be a runway model or anything like that, and if I am, then it's a different kind of runway. So I just figured that, again, it was about being me and just doing it the way that I knew how to do it best, and accepting myself. And that's hard, these days. I mean, I'm so glad that when we were in university, we didn't have Facebook, we didn't have
Right.
Instagram, we didn't have cell phones. Like, we didn't have any
Right.
of that stuff. And it was great because you could get away with things and there was no evidence of it. But it was also, we didn't have that constant comparison and that constant judgment on us all the time, which I think is really harsh now. And that's probably why I'm so passionate about the mental health stuff.
Yeah. Something that I've taken from this first half hour with you, Georgette, is just that work ethic. It, like, 8 practices a week. Well, I do 13. Okay, well, you handed your logbook in and you still showed up for 1,500-meter swims on Sunday mornings. And even with the track and field, it's like, I'm going to try something and I'm going to work my hardest once again. And it still goes back to effort over results. You didn't know where this was going to land. Where it did land you was school record holder for 30 plus years, like you said. You were the Canadian national champion, I believe, for at least 12.
Yeah,
How long
17
did
time.
you?
Yeah, 15.
17. Wow.
Yeah, 17-time national champion. Yeah, 15 in the shot put and 2 in discus.
Yeah, which is crazy, and that all started with a swim coach basically who said they didn't think you could be a swimmer because you were black, and or they just pulled your scholarship, which kind of, we talk about, detours in life and things that seem in the moment to be negative and stopping you from progressing, but the only thing that stops you from progressing is yourself. And that's where the effort over results mentality comes from, and what I love about what you're saying today. Let's talk about your Olympic journey, because once again, 30 plus year record holder at Washington State, 17-year national champion in Canada, with shot put and discus. Um, let's fast forward though to I believe it was 1992. It was the Barcelona Olympics. Did you qualify? You wouldn't have qualified in '88, right? At
No,
all?
I had just started throwing in '88. I had left
Right.
swimming in '80, I think it was the fall of '87, beginning of January 1988. And so I had just started doing track.
Right. Okay. So what was the tipping point from just starting out at track, getting those practices in, learning rotational shot, which by the way, people's not easy to do. Glide is much easier. And now I'm kind of throwing shade at myself because I was a glider, but not easy to do. Where was the tipping point where it's like, you know, 15 meters, 55 feet, whatever you want to call it, but the distances that now put you in the top 3 in Canada, and now we're like, hey, this is an Olympic hopeful. What year did that happen? And why do you think that happened? Because that's to go from starting throwing shot put in 87 to being on the Olympic team 4.5 years later is incredibly quick, really, when you think about it, unless someone just has crazy, genetics and they're just built for that sport. But like you said, you came out of swimming at a size that really wasn't thrower size. So when did
Yeah.
that turning point happen for you?
I believe it was probably between 1989 and 90. In 1988, 1989, I trained a ton. I was a workhorse. There was nobody that outworked me ever. But the one thing that I didn't learn was about rest. And so 1990 is where I really started to make the huge gains because I worked with Marcia and I'd be like, I can't go today. Like, we competed on the weekend, we've traveled, whatever. I want to just take the day and catch up on my studies and just rest. And when I started doing more of that, and Friday nights after the last practice, go home, get in the bath, have a glass of wine, watch movies, those types of things. Started doing more of that. And I found that my body started responding. I was able to recover faster. I was able to come back and work even harder. And I started enjoying sport again because for the first couple of years in track, it was all about getting it done. And I think when I started understanding a little bit more about rest and a little bit more about nutrition, and then again, just layman learning all of these things and working with different people, realizing that, a Snickers bar or French fries weren't the best way to pre have your snack before your training session, to have other things. And, because again, protein bars and shakes and all that stuff were just
Didn't
coming up
exist.
then.
Yeah, barely.
And we didn't have the training tables that they have now where they can finish their weight training session and go right to the shake bar and get, their protein supplement and whatever else. So that was a lot of trial and error too, but I spent a lot of time learning about that and just treating myself better. So once I started doing that, then things started coming, 90 is really I really broke out and won my first national title. 91, um, I was going against Melly Torcolacci, and we were back and forth and back and
Oh,
forth, and
jeez.
she beat
Right.
me at the on the last throw. So I missed world championships that year because I came second instead of first. And I thought, never again am I gonna get beaten. I'm gonna go after this. And it was one of those things where it just kind of drove me. And it was one of those things where I really started to enjoy and love sport and again be curious about the things that my body could do. And it was never about what kind of extra supplementation am I going to need to be able to do this or do that. I mean, I was never, much for the drug culture or anything like that. People would say, I ran on blue whales and Slurpees because I was a sugar fiend. I still am. But, it was always about, okay, what do I need to do to make myself feel good enough to be able to achieve the things that I wanted to.
Georgette, did you ever, when you qualified for the Olympics, let's talk about that moment that happened. Was there ever any imposter syndrome in the sense of you look at that and go, how did I end up here? Like 3, 4 years prior, or less even, it was like I was basically a swimmer. I was a really good swimmer, and or coming out of Regina, Saskatchewan. Not a lot of Olympians for my audience. Not a lot of us come out of Saskatchewan and go to the Olympics. So did you ever have that moment, or were you always pretty confident in yourself and in that the effort and that the work you put in and that you deserve to be there?
Confident, I felt like I deserved to be there, but at the same time, you're like, okay, that last meet, I know that I got the mark, but did they mismark it or whatever? Or how did this go? Or,
I've been there.
I didn't actually believe I was selected to the Olympic team until I saw it in the newspaper. Once I saw it in the newspaper, then I knew that it was there. In 92, I was the only female thrower that went. So I was with a bunch of male throwers. And they're all kind of like, okay, well, yeah, you can come along and hang with us. And the coach, Bogdan Propowski, he was like, well, okay, you're okay. You can come and do some stuff and whatever. And then my coach, Glenn Runcie at the time, was kind of a maniac. And then he would come and try and switch things around. And so there was a lot of tussling, about who was going to claim this newfound thrower. There was a lot of confusion. There wasn't like there wasn't the kind of organization and skill, and there wasn't a lot of the preparation and support in those Olympics for a new athlete like there is now.
Mm.
Like now they have training camps and they have all these different things to support them and to prepare them for the competition. There, you were just kind of fending for yourself. So I didn't have enough time to feel like an imposter because I was just trying to understand that I was there. And then being at the Olympics and then being around all of my um, swimming friends, Mark Tewksbury and Andrea Nugent, and all these people that I grew up with and swam with, so watching them do their competitions and then hanging out with the US team and the US swimmers and talking to Rowdy Gaines and Steve Lundquist, like these were my idols and being able to hang out with them a little bit. And then some of the US throwers and Connie Price and Ramona Pagel and all these people that I used to hang out with. It was just such an incredible, overwhelming sensation. But at the same time, I was like, I know I can do this. I'm just going to go out there and do the best I can. And then I got out there and I was the smallest person there. In Canada, I was like, oh, you're a big girl. And I got out there and it's like, oh, hi, Tiny. How's it going? What you doing here? So just learning again about perception and learning again about, okay, you're a unique individual and you just got to go out and do your unique skills and do the best you can, and ending up 15th in the world. I mean, I would have liked to have performed my very best throws there, but I probably mentally wasn't prepared to walk into a stadium with 70,000 people and throw because you and I both know, you go to a track meet and you're lucky if there's 7 people that ever watch the shot put. So there was those things where it would have been nice to have been prepared a little bit better, but I still had the most incredible experience, and I made the most out of my experience. I have stories galore about the things that happened, in the Olympic Village, and my meetings with Boris Becker and lunches with Jennifer Capriati and meeting Arnold Schwarzenegger and just all the things that happen when you're in the village. It was an incredible experience, and it helped me kind of learn to keep going and to push forward. And I remember the 92 experience, I said, "Okay, I wanna come back here, I wanna do this again." In 93, I started working up even harder than I could, but then my body kinda gave out, and you get anemia and you have all these things that you don't pay attention to. So I learned a lot about, yes, you can work really hard, but you have to have some kind of flow in there.
Yeah.
And I don't say balance. I never talk about work-life balance or balance at all. It's about flow. Sometimes you're up, sometimes you're down. Because when you're balanced, you're stagnant, and when you're stagnant, you die. And so it's always about movement. Movement is something that I will preach my whole life, always moving forward and somehow finding a way to keep moving. So I learned about that, and then did really well at Commonwealth Games in 94 and then went through and came close to breaking the Canadian record, in 95, 96, missed the Olympic team in 96 by a very short distance, and then working hard, all the way up to 2000s, getting ready to go to the Olympic trials in 2000s, and then having health scare with asthma attacks and things like that stopped me from training, and then going and missing. I had to just come in the top 3 for the shot put so I could go to the Olympics, and I missed by 4 centimeters. On the last throw, a thrower came and had their best throw of their life and beat me by 4 centimeters, so I didn't get to go in 2000. And I had the same thing happen in the discus because I had qualified in both, and that was 10 centimeters. So everything happens for a reason. But then after that, I was in bobsleigh. I got into bobsleigh,
Right.
and being part of the national women's bobsleigh team, and then help them qualify to have a team go to the 2002 Olympics in Salt Lake. So it taught me all these different things, and then bobsleigh taught me about working with a team because I had always worked just by myself and just did what I had to do and worked really hard and focused on me. And I got into bobsleigh and it's like, "Oh, no, you got 3 or 4 other people that you have to kinda consider, with your training and with whatever else, and you're not the star anymore, you're the brakeman, you're the one that supports the driver." So it was an interesting way of just kind of learning about commitment in a different way and working with a team and how to build a team. And all of these skills, throughout my whole sporting career taught me everything that I've needed for my professional career and for the things that I've done after that.
When you take a look back at your athletic career and you know, we've like you said, we've covered swimming, we've covered high performance track and field, you know, bobsleigh. But when you take a look at the entire body of work, what is it that you're most proud of, Georgette?
Growing up, every day I showed up, no matter what, no matter how I was feeling, no matter what was going on in my head, after crashes, all kinds of stuff. When you have the like, I don't want to do this, and then you're like, nope, just show up, take that step. The fact that I didn't quit, I would try something new, but I never quit anything. It would be a, a building upon, it's a step over step over step, and you just keep building. And that's kind of how I've done everything. Even when I retired from competing competitively, I didn't really quit sport. I just moved into something else, and that was taking my experiences and helping share those with other people so they could have the same kind of drive and curiosity and love of the sport that I did. And I didn't care what sport it was, as any sport, but it's about getting out of your head and getting back into the joy of doing that. And I think that's what kind of got me into coaching. I'd already been coaching, at a younger level, since about 95, but then when I got to the University of Alberta in 2002, 2003, that's when the coaching really kind of took over. And it wasn't about the science of coaching. I worked more about the art of coaching. All the things that I didn't get from some of the coaches that I had coming up, and also expanding on some of the great things that I learned. And it was about the person and about how to find a way to ignite that fire, that passion within them to help bring out whatever it was that they wanted to do. And sometimes for some of them, it was just to create a friend group and to be there. And one of the things that I loved about my time at the University of Alberta is when I took over the team, we had maybe about 40 team members. When I left the U of A, we had over 100 team members. And my thing for everybody was like, you may not make, conference selection, you may not make it to university nationals or anything like that, but if you show up every day and be the best teammate that you can, so that way you get the best out of yourself and you're helping others get the best out of themselves, and you create the bond that supports each other, then you're allowed to be on this team. And I think one of the things I'm most proud of is that many of those athletes that I coached back in 2003, 2004, 2005 are all still friends today, supporting each other. Some of them are married, but they remember and they support each other, and they talk about, how much they love the sport, and that's helped move them forward into all the things that they're doing now with the love of sport, the love of movement, the love of fitness and wellness and being out there and doing things. And so I think if I have to be proudest of anything, it's the impact that I've had on other people just from showing up.
My heart is full right now with what you just said because once again, the effort over results philosophy. Like when I talk to athletes and coaches and high performers, when you ask them about their career, and I'm talking about in any arena and not just sports, most people will tell you that their proudest their moments, their greatest accomplishments have nothing to do with accolades. They're
Yeah.
not gonna say, you know, it was the Stanley Cup we won or the Olympic gold medal. They talk about the camaraderie. They talk about going through workouts together. That's what even today with you and I, Georgette, and having our background in Washington State and knowing each other for all these years, I love these stories. I don't want to talk about the championships and things like that. I want to talk about the coaches that we both experienced and what they
Yeah.
did to, you know, to shape us as people and what you said now that you're a coach and that you've coached and even when I own my business, the employees that I had or the kids that I've coached, I want to hear that they grew into better people. Not that they, you know, I coached, you know, 7 provincial champions. It's like, no, I want to know that they went on to do something bigger and better in life because of what they learned and because they
Yeah.
learned hard work and they understood that it really is effort that the only thing that you can control. So, beautifully said. Thank you for that. So for many athletes, the hardest part isn't necessarily the competing. It's really what comes after, and you've already touched upon it. So what was the transition like for you from going completely, okay, you're not an athlete anymore, you're not competing anymore. The transition into, let's call it real adult life, as we all have experienced after sports. And what was that transition? Was it a smooth transition? I know you said you went into coaching at the U of A from 2003 to 5. You probably did a little bit of coaching, even maybe even after that at times. But when did you have to fully transition into, wow, I'm an adult now. I need to get a job and start doing adult things. And what was that like for you? Because I know my identity as an athlete when I left the CFL was difficult. I actually ended up going back to school and kind of restarting again because I never got a degree the first time. Nobody needs to know that. But I went back and got a degree and then had to get a real job. Like, so what was that transition going from high performance athlete to everyday Georgette?
Well, I mean, it took a while because I went from high performance athlete into coaching and then high performance coaching. I was coach for I was an apprentice coach at the 2004 Olympics for track and field. I was American Games, Pan American Games coach in 2007. I went to the Paralympics in 2008 in Beijing coaching, have been part of national teams. And so I just kind of threw myself, what I had thrown into athletics, I threw into coaching. And so I got all of my credentials and, I'm an IAAF certified coach. So I'm, top level, all of that type of stuff, and pushed myself the same way until my job at the university stopped. And then it was like, now what do I do? I've always been an athlete. It was easy to go from athlete to coach, but now how do I take everything that I've learned and move it into something else? And took me a while, struggled a little bit, worked at gyms and did different things, and then got on with the city of Edmonton, working with all of the 13,000 employees and trying to get them to take the elevator and not eat the donuts around the water cooler and those types of things. And it was interesting, that's where I had worked with mental health and had dealt with mental health throughout my years at the university, because we had many unfortunate things happen. We'd had athletes pass away, so then dealing with grief, suicide, so then dealing with, learning the signs and prevention and things like that. And then I got formal training to do a lot of that when I started working with the city of Edmonton and realizing, that absenteeism, presenteeism, burnout, and all those things that were coming upon, and the pressures that people put on themselves every day, because we all come to work or all come to, wherever it is that we're trying to perform, and we very rarely have an empty bag that we're carrying with us. It's usually full of rocks and stones and stuff that you're trying to navigate. And people say, well, just be who you are here and leave home and whatever. And it doesn't happen that way. That's why I don't believe in work-life balance. It doesn't work. And so it was about, how am I able to support people in this realm, in their own kind of world. And so I started teaching them mental health first aid. And so I'm a certified mental health first aid instructor, and I also do the working mind and those types of things. And I love it because it's information and literacy and education that can really help people understand themselves and support others. And I was working at the city of Edmonton as the corporate health consultant, and then fire rescue had a suicide. And I had been working with the chief at the time, and we were working on the mental health charter for the city. And so I knew him, and I was just like, what do you have at fire? And they were like, we don't have any programming. And I said, I would love to work with you on that. And he goes, well, when something comes up, we'll let you know. And then their health and wellness person was leaving. So then I applied, got the role, worked with the union, and got the role as the health and wellness coordinator for fire rescue. And my first project was to put together a mental health training program. And we did that. It grew so much that I had to split my job in half, and we actually had to hire a mental health coordinator to actually take over all the programming I put together. At first, it was hard for me to let go of that, but I had so many other skills, and I had also put together um, a wellness clinic so we could do occupational health and safety testing for firefighters so that they could know their numbers and then know how events were affecting their health, because we were trying to prevent cancers and those types of things. So I had already been working with that, and then also working with pure fitness training, and trained 35 firefighters to be able to work throughout the rest of the 1,300 firefighters to be able to help them progress with their physical training, and then also working with 50 mental health um, support people to be able to help with the mental health thing. So there's a huge program that kind of blossomed from the time that I was there to the fact where we had one of the first real mental health programs in the country. I was traveling all around Canada teaching mental health and then working for the Department of National Defense and CIPSTERT doing Road to Mental Readiness and teaching different smaller firehouses like in Halifax after they had a big event and in some of the smaller towns in Alberta and just working with letting people know that it's okay not to be okay. What's not okay is not having somebody to talk to about it or not feeling safe to be able to be in an environment where you can say, "Hey, this is gnawing at me. Like,
Yeah.
I just need you to listen." And so creating that program is something I'm really proud about, and then creating that balance and letting them know you can't have good physical health without having good mental health, and you can't have good mental health without physical health. You have to move. And so the teachings and the things that I did with fire rescue services for the 10 years that I was there will always be something that I'm really proud of, and I still talk to a lot of the firefighters this day, and I've been away from there for 4 years now. And something about taking everything that I've learned as an athlete and through all the things, the trials and tribulations and all things that I've gone through and putting it into a format, just saying to people, I'm not special. All I did was try to give what I had to give every day I showed up. And I realized that I had something to contribute. I may not be the most eloquent of speakers. I may not be the most prolific in my thought patterns, but I will show up, I will listen, and I will give whatever it is that I can to support, to help. And it's not something where I push that on you or where I tell you what to do. It's like I listen and I guide and I support. And that's the role that I'm in now, and that's what I love to do. My passion is to try to get as many corporations and organizations to learn about mental health and hire someone like me to come in and teach and show and share and give opportunities for enlightenment, give opportunities to drop that sack of rocks that you got that you've been carrying around like an anchor, and to understand that we don't need to be victims of our past. Every day gives us a new chance to be able to do something new and to do something good and to just be. That's the way that I work every day. And as I get older, it's about fate and all these different things as well. I mean, I it's ironic for me that I talk so much about mental health and I deal with mental health a lot. And now I'm experiencing it a lot. My family with my mom recently being diagnosed with dementia. And my dad in his last years, he knew that there wasn't something quite right with mom, and he did everything he could to protect her and to make sure that she was supported, and right down to the day that he died. And in many ways, because of my mom's mental health. My dad perished a lot earlier than what he probably should have. And learning about those things and dealing with that and understanding that, and again, not holding resentments or holding on to the past, but figuring out how do we move forward after tragedy, after grief, through when things don't work out the way that you think it should. When I moved out to Vancouver, I thought that this last job that I've had as an athletics director at uh, university, I thought that was my dream job, and that's where I was going to stay. That's where I was going to retire. But when you have different ideologies than other people, sometimes things don't always mesh, and you don't end up being part of the team anymore, and things get cut short. But it also gave me an opportunity to learn more about myself and understand who I am at this phase of my life, as we're getting close to 60 now, and looking
Thanks
at
for
like,
reminding
okay,
me.
well, just had to throw that in there, and we're not the 14 and 15 or 19 and 20-year-olds anymore, but although it feels like yesterday,
Right.
but understanding that we can still grow, we can still build, we can still achieve, we can still contribute. There's still so much left that we can do. And so that's what I'm learning now, and that's what I'm loving is, with the mental health training, with senior citizen fitness and aging adult fitness and movement, and showing people that just doing puzzles and Sudoku and whatever isn't enough. You need to keep moving your body. You need to keep challenging your body, and in doing that, you challenge your mind. And if you do that, you keep aging gracefully. And that's my mission. That's what I want to do now.
Um, Mm. I took so much from what you just said, and I'm gonna touch upon a couple of things. One thing, when it comes to, and because who I generally work with the most is businesses, it's leadership teams and C-suite and so forth, business owners, is gone are the days where you can just tell your employees, hey, as soon as you hit that front door, leave your baggage at the door because we don't want to deal with your personal bullshit, in the workplace. And whether that was said, literally or figuratively, it really was what you and I experienced growing up in the workplace. It was basically just when you come to work. And I even remember, Georgette, I remember coaches telling me that on the football field. It's like, you can't do anything about it. You turn that off,
Yep.
part of your life off, as soon as you step on this field. And now what my group and what EOR is trying to get companies and leaders in all walks of life to understand is that psychological safety is number one. It is where
Yes.
people will thrive and grow and really find their best and their potential, and they'll work even harder for you. It takes a little time to build that culture, but to
Mhm.
provide that psychologically safe culture where people can be themselves, where they're not being punished for mistakes, where they feel open to ask questions and to question certain things, uh, is a beautiful. I mean, Google's proved it, Patagonia's proved it, Pixar's proved it. It's in my book. I've had those examples in the book that I'm releasing, and so what you just said about that is what we all need to as leaders. And when I say leaders, I don't want people to think I'm just talking about CEOs or just talking about head coaches of professional sport. We're talking about
Anyone.
anywhere where you have a group of people, whether it be one or 101
Yeah.
people that you're leading to grow and make them better.
Yep.
That is your goal.
Exactly. The people that
Yes.
stand.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
And you just want to continue to profess to them that as long as we see the effort, we're happy. Like we I mean, don't get me wrong, once again, results matter, but it's almost an 80-20 rule. It's like we acknowledge that we want results, but we got to focus on the person themselves. And I'm really hoping that in this age of AI and technology that where we're losing a lot of people and losing a lot of job spots to technology, that we start to almost come back full circle to our roots of that camaraderie, that culture, that environment in whatever arena of people that you want to be around, that social connection. You said that right at the start. We talk about social connection,
Mhm.
and they talk about how people actually deteriorate quicker when they have less social connection.
Oh, definitely. COVID did that.
Yeah,
It destroyed people because they weren't able to be around. They weren't able to have the touch. They weren't able to do those things. And then we came out of COVID and people were all excited at first, but then we had everything was a Zoom and everything was
screens.
it was convenience over compassion, over empathy, over connection. And that's the thing that frustrates me is when it becomes convenience over connection, that's where you lose some of the most incredible ideas or thoughts or opportunities. And I love being able to just connect with people one on one and even in groups, just but allow people to be themselves and let everybody understand that we all have something unique to bring to whatever circle that we are involved with or that we get involved with. And we don't have to be like everybody else. That whole comparison, when I read some stuff on LinkedIn and some of the other things where it's like, you need to be this kind of leader, you need to do this to be a leader or whatever. You just need to be you. And if you can be empathetic and you
Yeah,
can listen more than you talk, and you can be present and hold space
right.
and then work with people, you will get amazing results.
Yeah,
And and in my last position, that was one of the things that I loved was that the people that I worked with, the athletes that I worked with, the things that we did together, they garnered the hugest results and the most gains. It's when you are told to stay in your lane or you need to act a certain way, or you have to be perceived as this or as that, because it's the perception that is going to gain whatever the spoils are. Then we start losing the sparks. We start losing the contributions that everybody has. We start losing the ability to really make something special. And then work just becomes work. It's just a place where you clock in at a certain time and you clock out. There's no passion. You get your spreadsheets done, you tick off your boxes,
Yeah.
and there's no joy. And if you have to go to a place to work or for your career and there's no joy in what it is that you're doing, then you're selling yourself short, because we only have a very finite lifespan. And if you spend most of your time in a place where you don't want to be just because it's giving you some financial
Paying the
freedom,
bill. Yeah.
yeah, paying the bills. I mean, we have to pay the bills. I mean, I'm not a
Yeah. Yeah.
I am not a fictional creature that believes that, oh, fairy dust and whatever. Yeah, I know you have to pay the bills. I
Yeah.
realize that. But there's more to life. And I find that when you can build up an environment where you've got connection, and then you end up with trust and the empathy, you will get gains far beyond what you ever imagined from putting in systems and routines.
I need that on a billboard. You and I are very much on the same mission. It's and like I said, this isn't just in the workplace. This
Mhm.
is you're coaching an amateur sports team. These are teachers in the classroom. These are parents with their own children.
Yes.
It is creating that, and people are going to roll their eyes. And here's the thing: you and I are a couple of tough old athletes that we went through the ground and pound type mentality and work harder and so forth, and we understand how that can affect people positively too. Don't get me wrong, but
Mhm.
there's so many leaders that I talked to today when I mentioned the word safe space or psychological safety or whatever, and they roll their eyes and they think it's kumbaya bullshit and woo woo stuff. And it's like, look, that's fine. You can ignore the messaging, go ahead and continue building your culture the way you're building it, which is the command and control. And you're going to just burn through people and you're
And
not going to get the best of them. You're going to get people who are just showing up and doing enough work to collect a paycheck and not get fired. It's kind of that funny movie scene from Office Space where he's sitting with the guys that are trying to assess the company. It's like,
yeah,
hey, I'm just doing enough not get fired here, but really, I don't care. And that's how a lot of people go through their day to day. And like you said, people need to pay bills, so they stay in the same job, but they got one eyeball out the door already. And we are now living in 2026 in a culture and an environment, and I'll just say in workspaces for now to keep it simple, where Gen Z especially is basically saying no, we're not dealing with this shit anymore.
yeah, they want
We're
more.
gonna they want more. They want to know they're part of something. They want to know how
Yep.
they're connected to the bigger picture. They want to understand the values of the company. I work with CEO groups and C-suite leadership teams where the values are on the website. They couldn't even recite them to me in the
Yeah.
meeting.
It's because
What?
it's all about checking off boxes.
Yeah,
It's all about
virtue
perception,
signaling.
and it's all about image,
Yep,
and it has less to do that with character. I
yep.
think we forget about character and how character gets built and how it is displayed and how we are able to share that. I think so many times people have gotten that it's all about the show and, fake
Right?
it till you make it type
Yep.
stuff. It's like, no, don't fake it till you make it. Just be who you are. Don't fake anything. Let people see who you are and realize that there is more than one way to accomplish a goal. And it's about looking at all the different ways of doing it. And it's unfortunate that people look at psychological health and safety and they roll their eyes like, oh, this is just another checkbox thing that we have to do, or classes and whatever. It's like, no, it's like giving your staff and the people that you work with and work for the ability to breathe again,
Yeah.
the ability to feel safe and themselves, and then they can bring their best selves to the office, and they don't have to worry if they have some kind of a mental health diagnosis or issue, or if they're dealing with an aging parent, because right now at the age where most of us are is that we're in the sandwich zone where we've got parents that are aging and then we're having to deal with them, and we've got kids that are dealing with issues now that I'm glad I didn't have to deal with. Like, at 30 and under right now, the stuff that they have to deal with, we didn't have any of that.
Yeah.
And so being able to have that empathy and that understanding, and that doesn't mean that I'm trying to give people a jail-free card, like you don't have to do your work because
Right.
you're well are suffering. But it's the understanding that, okay, I understand that you're going through this. So let's look at the things that you have on your list to do, and let's see what we can adjust so then that way we can both still accomplish what we need to accomplish to make sure that we're moving in the right direction. And I think there needs to be more of those conversations, but people are just too busy or they don't feel like it's
All
worth
about
it. So they
metrics and KPIs and goals and results. And this is, once again, this is what I'm trying to break. This is the culture I'm trying to break in so many corporations. It's
it's
so
not
much
about
about the
results.
end result. And once again, people, I'm not saying results don't matter, but
Oh,
when you make it the only messaging to your staff, to your employees, you break them, you burn them out. People don't leave bad
exactly.
jobs, they leave bad leadership and they leave bad culture.
Exactly. Exactly. If you deal with the little things, the big things take care of themselves. And we've heard that our whole lives, but it's the little things. As an athlete, you do your stretching, you do the extra things, you write your logbook, you do all the little things. And then everything else, the results, making national teams. I mean, I made my first national team at 13, in traveling in Europe, swimming and whatever. Those things took care of themselves. I didn't think about that when I was training. I was just looking after, okay, I need to stretch, I need to do this, I need to do that. And then the results came. I wasn't planning on making an Olympic team after 4 years at Washington State. It was just I did the little things and learned about my body and learned about strength and those different things, and then the results kind of came from that. Whether for it's being in coaching and being a national team coach, and I still am able to do some coaching with the national team and some mentorship coaching and things like that. That didn't come from me going, "Oh, I gotta take this course and this course and this course, and that's how I do it." It's like, no, it's about creating that connection with the people that you're working with when you're working with them. So then that way they wanna work with you again, and it's, the same thing whether if I was working with fire rescue or with athletes now, it's creating that environment where they can trust you. And I had someone say to me yesterday that in my last role that my student athletes trusted me. I had an open door policy and they knew they could come in and talk to me about anything and I had no judgment. I just listened. If they wanted guidance or support, we would talk about that, but the whole thing was about being there.
Yeah.
And now people aren't there. People aren't don't show up. They phone it in or they can work
Text
from
it in.
home. So
Yeah.
they turn on their computer and watch sitcoms.
Well, and
You know,
I think some people enjoyed the work from home more because of the work culture that they were having to go to every day.
oh
And
exactly. They
like
fit it.
I'd much rather work from home during my last couple of years because it was a more psychologically safe environment for me, right?
Yeah. That was the one thing I was also proudest is that in where I last worked, in my office, my staff wanted to come to work because they enjoyed being around each other. We supported each other. We talked a lot. They had the option to work from home, but many times they came into the office because they felt that support
Yeah.
and that helped them deal with the things that were happening at home as well, with aging parents and those different things. But
Yeah.
there was a support group and they felt like this was a place where they could just be and yet they could still contribute. And that's probably as a leader, that's one of the things I'm proudest of is that my staff wanted to be there and they wanted to work hard and they wanted to create and they wanted to build and they wanted to do things because I inspired them to just go ahead and do it. I didn't micromanage, wasn't, one of those people saying, "Well, pass everything by me." It's like, "No, if you think it's a great idea and you know what our goals and our mandates are, and you think this is great, let's run with it. And I will support you. And if you have to throw me under the bus to do that, that's fine, because I got your back." And that's I think we need more people to kinda go out on a limb sometimes and just be like, "I'm gonna believe in my people, and I'm gonna trust them, and I'm gonna let them show me all the great things that they have inside of them and show me what they can do. And if we have to make adjustments along the way, we do. But for the most part, just go out and shine.
Yeah. And sometimes you it's so important just to have that quick one-to-one, and like you said, just be real with your people, show a little vulnerability. Like I wear my emotions on my sleeves. I know what everybody else knows it around me, but at least they know they're getting the real me
Yeah,
24/7, no matter what. One of the things that you had mentioned earlier about, your team feels good about coming to work and working with you and feels safe in that environment. It reminded me, and I'm going to finish on this, is uh, a few years ago, my daughter was working at a place. I'm not going to name it, obviously, but she had a lot of sick days. And then she left there and moved to a much better work environment. All of a sudden, the sick days went down. Huh? Wonder how that happens. And I remember her even missing a day, and she called me and she goes, "I feel so crappy for having to miss today because I really like going to work."
yeah,
And I almost teared up because I was like, "This is what we are trying to achieve." In all aspects of our life, is to create that environment where the people that you are leading, working with, even if you're part of the group, even, you still
yep,
want to create that environment for everyone around you, where I'm excited Monday morning to go to work. you
yeah,
know I mean,
yeah,
you're tired and whatever, but you still are like, I don't, it took me 13 years at my previous job to finally say, I really don't want to go to work today, and I'm not going
yeah,
to get into it.
yeah,
But for 13 years, I was like, no, I kind of enjoy going to work. There's nothing about work that I really dislike. And then things
yeah.
change, whatever, and leadership change. And so the last couple of years wasn't as good, but that's what you want to create. So here's the final question I have for you, Georgette. I want you to imagine you're giving a keynote speech, and the room is filled with parents, coaches of teams, leaders in business, teachers, you know, leaders. Give me 30 seconds of part of that speech to for a takeaway, that one thing that if you're going to tell them that they can change, that they can make their environments better, that makes them a better leader in that environment, what are you telling them?
We never know what the next day is gonna hold. We never know what is ahead of us. We don't know the results that are gonna happen from the different things that we do today. We just don't know, and we need to try to find a way to stop trying to make things happen and do the work, setting the scene, laying the path to have things unfold the way that they're supposed to. We need to keep being curious, and we need to keep putting ourselves out there and keep moving forward, because what happens many times is we'll have that goal, we'll have that thing that we want to do, or that result we want to achieve, and we'll make it 99% of the way, and then we stop for whatever reason. And the whole idea is to keep moving forward.
Yeah.
The greatest temptation in life is to stay where we are. We need to resist that temptation. We need to move forward. We need to do all the things that we can do to be able to just keep being curious, keep finding a way to to be the best in ourselves. The hardest thing that I've seen in my many years, and especially being around school kids and things like that in schools, is that when kids first go to school, they have that light, they have that sparkle, they have that weird awesomeness. They wear
Yeah.
purple and pink and green hats, and one right shoe, that's
Right.
green, and one, that's pink, and they don't care. They have fun with it. But then you get to middle school and that's beaten out of them because they're told that they have to conform, or there's peer pressure, or all those types of things, and they lose it. And then as we get to
Yeah.
be adults, we wish to be like that, but we don't. And anybody that is that way, we push them aside and call them weird, and we make excuses because we're uncomfortable with that. And what I'd like people to do is just to say, screw all of that, screw perception, screw, what people think we're supposed to be, and just be. Be
Yeah.
the best you that you can be. Bring out the quirkiness, bring out the curiosity, bring out that love and that desire and that spark, and just shine.
I could not have scripted a better ending to this podcast. Georgette, thank you for sharing your story, your honesty today. This was so powerful. I think this is going to be an incredible have incredible impact on my audience and to everyone listening. If this conversation resonated with you, take a moment to reflect on where you're measuring your results instead of effort. What might change if you didn't? Thanks for listening to the Effort Over Results podcast.